right, good morning. It is 9:05 scriptural time to start. We give grace, 5 minutes. 6 minutes is too much. So 9:05, we're going to get started. All right, how many people caught the game last night? Did everybody get to watch that? That was interesting. Some good times watching that. I had a Michigan fan or two in my house watching it, so that was fun. It actually was very good. Just the back and forth was really good. Also, does anyone know if harvest has happened yet? There seems to be a lot more sneezing and all that fun kind of stuff going on. But I hope everyone is staying well and that things are going well at your household. All right, we're talking about ethics, morality. Just to give you a quick recap before we launch into this week, the topic that we're going for this week is just to recap what we talked about last week, and that is the ethical system called moral relativism. So what moral relativism is when each person gets to make up their own mind what is right and what is wrong. So what is right for me may not be the same thing that is right for you. And moral relativists also tend to go from situation to situation, making up their minds as to if this is right or this is wrong, what's the best thing to do. So it might change from situation to situation, and it's going to change from person to person. Again, mine might be different from yours. And so we have some interesting things at play there. We've talked about that. We talked about the hard part of moral relativism is if what's right for you is right for you and what's right for me is right for me, then we don't have any right to have any conversation about what is right and wrong. We have no way to have an opinion because the moment you start saying, I don't think what you think is right, you've just violated your own system of ethics, which is I get to decide what's right for me. And you don't, so we can't have a conversation. And that's, unfortunately, that's where we are at in our current society, in my humble opinion, is that we have a lot of moral relativists out there who say, I have the right to make up my decision for what is right and wrong for my life, and you don't get to say anything. But the moment they say that, again, they violated what their ethical system is. So we talked about moral relativism and the problems that come from that and from having each person make up right and wrong. We looked at the story of Paul in Athens, who was debating with the Epicureans, okay? The Epicureans believed that each person should do what leads to their own happiness. So you should do what makes you happy. That's the highest goal in life. And so you should do what makes you happy. And even to the point of they were just not sure about a lot of things, but it makes me happy. And another thing that might make me happy is I want to go to afterlife or heaven or whatever. And so they even had an idol to an unknown god in their city. So we'll just worship them all. There's not necessarily one that's right because they're all right for everybody. And if I want to, I'm going to worship the unknown God as well. And so into this, we had Paul come in and debate with them and talk to them about how there's one God. And they're debating with the Stoics about what is right and wrong. The Stoics believed you had an internal compass, and if you just had enough discipline, you could be disciplined in life. And of course, so you've got two very opposing views. Be disciplined, discipline yourself, live a good life. And then you have the Epicureans, just enjoy your life and have fun. That's the way things should go. Paul comes in and says there's actually a God that you guys are all missing out on. And he's the moral compass of the whole thing. So a very different set of teaching that came in from Christians at the time into that part of the world. We also touched on the modern day philosophy of follow your heart. Just follow your heart. Just what feels right. We looked at that, and we looked at how many scriptures talk about your heart. So many scriptures say, don't listen to your heart because it is deceitful above all. Your heart will deceive you. Everyone who's ever watched a sappy romantic show knows this, right? Or sappy romantic show, or for the guys, if you've ever watched Cops, okay? You've watched Cops. Oh, officer, but I love him. Well, he just smacked you around. What are you thinking? Your heart is deceitful, okay? I love this person. I want this so bad. Your heart is deceiving you. So we looked at how the heart is deceitful. We looked at how God said he will give us a new heart. Why would God give us a new heart if our current heart is good enough to be our moral compass? So a lot of things to think about with moral relativism. All right. So that's the recap of last week. This week, let's start again with our game that we play at the beginning of each session. But we're going to switch up our game a little bit this week. Instead of 2 truths and a lie, we're going to play 1 truth and 2 lies. So I'm going to give you 3 statements, but only 1 answer will be true. So we're not voting on what is not true this week. We're voting on which one of these is true. Today's answers come to us courtesy of a Barna research paper called America's New Moral Code. America's New Moral Code. All right. Question number 1. What percentage of American adults believe that knowing what is right or wrong is a matter of personal experience? Kind of what we talked about, moral relativism. It's my own personal experience leads me to my own beliefs of right and wrong. How many American adults believe that? Is it 74%? Is it 57%? Or is it 38% believe that my own experience helps me develop what is right or wrong? How many think the answer is American adults, there's 74% that believe it's my own personal experience, okay? How many believe it is 57%, kind of middle of the road? And how many of you believe it's 38%? Okay, very interesting. The correct answer is 57% of all American adults would say it's my own personal, but the answer I first gave at first, 74%, that's millennials. 74% of millennials say it's my experiences that develop my right or wrong. The last answer, 38%, that's the elder generation. The elder generation is almost exact opposite of millennials in where we get our sense of right and wrong. All right, second question. What percentage of Americans see morality as a matter of cultural consensus? You could also say every culture must determine what is acceptable morality for its people. So what percentage of Americans see morality as a matter of cultural consensus? In other words, we all need to come together on what is right and what is wrong. So how many Americans would say that? Is it, number 1, 65% say that we need to come together and have cultural consensus on morality? Is it 51%, or is it 30% say that we should have cultural consensus on what's right or wrong? Okay, how many of us think it is 65% say that of Americans say we should have cultural consensus? Okay. How many think it is 51%? And how many think 30% of Americans say we need cultural consensus? Okay. All right, the correct answer is number 1, 65% of Americans say we should have cultural consensus on moral questions, on what is right and wrong. That's how we decide it, is we need to get together and we all need to have consensus on what's right and wrong. 51%, that answer is actually from non-religious or non-faith-oriented people, would say that we need to have cultural consensus. And the last answer, 30%, is what Christians answered. The Christians say we need to have absolute cultural consensus on what is right and what is wrong in order to decide that. All right, third question. What percent of Americans believe the Bible provides us with absolute moral truths which are the same for all people in all situations without exception? All right, let me read that again. What percentage of Americans believe the Bible provides us with absolute moral truths which are the same for all people in all situations without exception? Is the answer 28% believe that, 59% believe that, or 83% believe that? Okay, so how many people believe the Bible provides us with absolute moral truths? How many think it's 28% of Americans believe the Bible provides that? Okay, how many believe 59%? All right, and how many believe 83%? Okay, so the actual answer there is 59% of Americans believe the Bible provides us with absolute moral truth, which is the same for all people, all situations. 28%, that answer came from non-religious people. So that was interesting to me, non-religious people. There are some who say the Bible has good moral truths. I think that's a great starting point, personally, for some conversations. 83% is Christians. 83% of Christians said the Bible provides moral absolutes for all time, all people without exception. All right. Next question. What percentage of American adults believe that the highest goal in life is to enjoy it as much as possible? What percentage of Americans believe that the highest goal in life is to enjoy it as much as possible? Is it 84%? Is it 67%? Or is it 54%? All right, how many Americans believe that the highest goal in life is to enjoy it as much as possible? How many of us believe that might be 84%, saying the highest goal is happiness? Okay, how many of us believe 67% of Americans say that's the highest goal? And how many of us believe 54%? Okay. The percentage of American adults who believe the highest goal in life is to enjoy it as much as possible is 84%. 84% of American adults believe the highest goal in life is to enjoy it as much as possible. And 67%, that answer was Christians who believe that. Again, something we need to be talking about in churches, in our lives, in our homes, is that truth is not always enjoyable. Truth is not always fun. Life is not always fun. How do you deal with that? Now, I have a problem because I'm an avoider. I'm a stuffer. I don't like conflict. That's my personality type. And so I have a tendency to just not acknowledge, like if something bad's going on, I just kind of want to, well, that's over here. And I'm just going to I'm going to have fun. I'm going to pretend like, but inside it's churning. And there's a lot of American adults that are that way. And we've got to start becoming okay with life sometimes not being fun or fair or nice or enjoyable or happy. But what do you do in those situations? That's what makes us moral people. How do we deal with those types of questions, with those types of things? All right. Next question. What percentage of American adults believe that people can believe whatever they want as long as those beliefs don't affect society? Percentage of American adults that believe people can believe whatever they want as long as those beliefs don't affect society. Is it 85%, 79%, or 58%? Okay, so how many of us believe, American adults believe people can believe whatever they want as long as it doesn't affect society? Is it 85%? Is it 79%? Or is it 58%? Okay. The correct answer here is 79% believe that you can believe whatever you want as long as it doesn't affect society. All right, next question. Last one. What percentage of Americans believe that moral truth is relative to your circumstances? In other words, there is no absolute, okay? So moral truth is relative to your circumstances. There's nothing that is absolute. How many Americans would believe that? Is it 41%? Is it 44%? Or is it 51%? So again, percentage of Americans who believe that moral truth is just relative to your circumstances. There's no absolute thing that is true all the time, kind of like the other question we had a little bit. How many of us believe it's 41% of Americans said that it's just relative to your circumstances? There's no absolute truth. How many of us believe it's 44%? And how many of us believe it is 51%? Okay. The correct answer of Americans that believe the moral truth is relative to circumstances is 44%. 41% is the boomer generation. And 51% is millennials, who again, it's all relative to your circumstances. Whatever your circumstances are, that's your moral code. So there's nothing absolute. Very, very interesting study. This study can be found at barna.com, but it also resulted in a book called Good Faith, Being a Christian When Society Thinks You're Irrelevant and Extreme. Again, that's called Good Faith, Being a Christian When Society Thinks You Are Irrelevant and Extreme. It's by a guy named David Kinnaman. Very, very interesting stuff to think about. In our country, where are we in our moral compass? All right. So today, I kind of wanted that to set us up, to tee us up for our study today. And the first question that I want to ask is, where do our morals come from? All right? Where do our morals come from? Now, we've kind of been talking about our ethical systems that we set up, but where do we get them? Where do we get this from? So, what do you all think? Where do our ethics come from?
Mom and Dad.
Okay, mom and dad. All right? Any other thoughts? The Bible, okay. Okay, so there was a group of people that we saw in our study for American adults that the Bible, they believe, provides absolute moral truth for everything in all situations. Others? Grandparents, okay. Okay, we look at our grandparents and they have a way that they've done things that they've believed that might be affecting us. Yes? Okay. So we might start off with our parents, and then it might change. We might change our minds on morality, ethics, what we decide is right and wrong as we get older. Good.
I believe another important place it comes from is our conscience. I believe God talks to us with His Word through our conscience. If we really listen to our conscience, now Satan talks through that same conscience. But I believe God will give us the wisdom to know the difference when I'm trying to be myself or if I'm going to be a servant of God. That's what it all boils down to.
Okay. So he's saying that that God speaks to us through our conscience, and so we have a conscience that helps guide us with right and wrong. His Word is a great thing to also look at as our guide, things that can guide us. Yes.
Well, it's probably not maybe where it should come from, but I think a lot of where it comes from for people is their peer group.
Okay.
And the media, meaning not just news, but movies, TV, what they see in society.
Okay. Your peer group and what we see in society. Again, we talked about this early in the class. Remember when we talked about the effect of social media and just how much information we are bombarded with day by day, helping ourselves and our young people learn to navigate and ask the question. Don't just flip through and go, yep, oh yeah, yes. No, you have to look through and say, is that really true? Now, is that really true? Well, I'm not sure. We need to learn to guide ourselves to ask the question, is that right or wrong, no matter who gives us the information. Don't take Franklin's word for it. Just because I'm standing up in front of here and I have this class, go check it out. Yes?
I'm going to read Romans chapter 2, and I realize when you cut in on scripture, you people have checked your Bible to read before and after. But anyway, now if I can find it back. When the Gentiles have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not a law are a law unto themselves, which show the works of the law written in their hearts. And I can keep going on, but anyway, even in the Gentiles, a non-believer, God is talking to these people through their conscience with His word.
Okay. So there are some things that are pretty universal, right? That God has put down. Even the Gentiles, it said, had some things that they did that they believed that were right and wrong. People generally know, no matter where you go in the world, it's not right to take another life, for example. So there are some things that are universal, but God has implanted a sense of right and wrong in us, okay, from Romans that we're reading. Very good, very good. So we have a bunch of different thought processes on all this. It's our parents, our grandparents, our peer group, our media, the things that are influencing us. There's a lot of different places where truth could come from, right? Yes?
One that we haven't talked about, but we've all read about recently, is through academia.
Okay.
Whether it's at the college level or at the grade school level, the influence of teachers.
Okay.
And then take that a step further. I call them thought leaders. In other words, people will write a book on a thought or a philosophy or whatever, and they can lead people down a different path.
Sure.
Something we need to watch for our kids. Anybody who's seen their kid go away to college and hear them say something, you go, where did you get that from?
Yeah. And I would add to that the rise of self-publication. I can write a book in a PDF format and have it on Amazon real quick. Does that make me an expert? Okay, I'm not an expert on this. I've stolen most of my material from someone else. Okay? Actually, a couple of different people. Okay? So here's the thing. What makes experts? And so we're listening to a lot of people who just, the only reason we listen is because they have our ear, because they're in front of us. They're on our phones. They're whatever it might be. The funny thing is colleges used to teach young people how to be thoughtful in everything that they read. And it seems like some of our educational institutions anymore are not teaching young people. They're teaching them this is what you should believe without question. So interesting thought there. Yes?
Yeah, it's really general the way you kind of put this lesson for me, but at the same time, I see that every man, woman, and child is born mind, body, and spirit. We all are born with that spirit. Now, a lot of us are lucky enough, well, I won't say lucky, but blessed enough to grow up in the church where we understand and raised in a way to understand that murder is a bad thing. But when you're dealing with that kid that's coming from a cartel where murder is regular things to them, they don't know that. So, everybody, so I think as Christians, it's very important that we not just talk about morals, that we live them.
Yeah.
So we can be that example so the world can see that.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of people that I've worked with, that I've had to deal with, their parents, man, just didn't have it, and the reason they didn't have it because their parents didn't have it, and so it just continues. And so in order to, ensure that the world can try to get to a better place, we need to make sure we got some people that work to try to do that.
Absolutely. And I think of, when my kids were little, I would take them to this mall over here, and they had a little play area. And I remember one time this other kid coming up and just hitting one of my children. And, of course, my reaction, I want to get up and run, but I said, just wait. And I sat there and I looked. Nobody ever got up. Nobody ever got up. And so my thought is, whose kid is this? Like, I'm watching my kids, and if my kids did that, I would have been on them, and I would have said, you want to see what hitting feels like? I mean, I'm going to teach them that's not right. But other people don't necessarily have all the same training that I had in what is right, what is wrong. Was there a hand back here? Yes.
C.S. Lewis writes in his Mere Christianity book about the moral law and how almost every single society has kind of these set laws that are universal. Don't kill, don't steal, things like that seem to be universal, that they just, in almost every society they have these laws. It doesn't matter if it's a governing society like America or it's a tribal society like other places. It seems like these places all have very similar laws, and it sounds like I'm trying to remember the gist of it because it's been about 7 years since I read the book. But basically, I think he was saying is that God influences all of us in some way to put down some kind of foundation for what is right and wrong.
Okay. Good. So all of this actually leads very well into what I want to touch on today, and that is what is called virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is not so much about what you do as about who you are. Okay, it's not so much about what you do as who you are. This is virtue ethics. There are some people who never seem to be tempted by certain vices. But it's not because of any deep decision making. It's just because that's the kind of people they are, okay? This is called virtue ethics. Now, let me read you a little dilemma here from Randy Harris's book, Life Work, that he likes to give to his students to talk to them again about ethics. He says, I'm now going to hit you with my favorite dilemma of all time. It's best for students, but the rest of you will understand it. I call this the Moby Dick dilemma. It is your last semester in college. You're getting ready to graduate with a degree in accounting. You have a job lined up with one of the few big accounting firms that are still left, and you have this girl or boy that is going to marry you, and life is perfect. And then you get the dreaded call from the registrar's office. You are one course short of graduation. You cry, you complain, you try to negotiate. But if you don't know this, you should. It is easier to negotiate with a terrorist than it is with a registrar at a university. Finally, you give in and ask, what do I have to do? You have to take an English course. And so you take the only English course that works into your schedule, which is early American literature. Now, the first thing you read in this course is the Scarlet Letter. There's a good chance that you read this book in school. As you know, it is a fascinating book. It is all about sex, but still manages to be boring. Leave it to the Puritans to take the most salacious possible topics and make them boring. So you get through that loser, and then you read Huckleberry Finn, and you're delighted about that because you didn't know that was literature. After that, you get to poetry. None of it rhymes, but the great thing about poetry is it's short, so you're doing fine. You then come to the last assignment in the course, which is to read the great American novel, which everyone knows is Moby Dick. Now, I'm now going to ask how many of you have read Moby Dick, and I'm not asking how many of you were assigned to it, how many of you actually read it. For those of you who haven't, Moby Dick is 800 dense pages about whaling. You're from Kansas. Whales have not been an important part of your life. We could say Nebraska too. It would just fit right there, wouldn't it? You're guessing that whaling is not going to be an important part of your life. By the way, my favorite abridgment of Moby Dick consists of one sentence. Everyone dies but Ish and fish. That's really all you need to know. And you think, I've been a good sport up till now, but I am not reading Moby Dick. So you read the Spark Notes, or Cliff Notes for a new generation, because you figure whoever wrote those things is going to understand the book way better than you anyway. You don't stop there because you're a good student. You watch both movies, The one with Gregory Peck and the one with the Star Trek guy. And by the way, the Gregory Peck one is better, way better. Amen. Well, you're not expecting to make an A on this test. You're just trying to get a C and get on with your life. You get to the final test, and the idiot of a professor puts one question on the final test worth 100 points. Did you read Moby Dick? And out in parentheses, he writes, the movies and cliff notes don't count. And if you answer this truthfully, you will get 0 points on the final. You will fail the course, you won't graduate, you will lose the job you have lined up, and that girl or boy is probably not going to marry a loser like you. So would you tell the truth in that circumstance? Now, it's interesting when I present this to my students, some students who I didn't think could think suddenly become theologians. Let's see, God is timeless, so I can say, I read the book. I will read it later, and it will be the same to God. I've given this dilemma to my ethics classes for a decade now at Abilene Christian University, and you'll be interested to know that 95% of my students say, in that case, of course, they would lie. I strongly suspect that the other 5% are lying about the fact that they wouldn't lie. Not only do they tell me they would lie in that case, they then proceed to try to convince me why that would be the right thing to do. Melville's dead, it's a victimless crime, God wants them to marry this girl and get this job so they'll be able to contribute to our church. All right. Now, virtue ethics is based on the kind of person you are. There are some people who in that situation might say, you know, I just feel so bad about lying. I couldn't, that 5%, that might be a 5% that's based on virtue ethics. Have you ever heard of someone who is so honest and upfront that it's just who they were? We had an American president that we haven't seen the likes of in a long, long time that had a nickname, Honest Abe. There was an article I was reading that says this: the future president was first called Honest Abe when he was working as a young store clerk in New Salem, Illinois. According to one story, whenever he realized he had shortchanged a customer by a few pennies, he closed the shop and delivered the change. It didn't matter how far he had to walk to get to their home. People recognized his integrity and were soon asking him to act as judge or mediator in various contests, fights, or arguments. According to Robert Rutledge of New Salem, Lincoln's judgment was final in all that region of the country. People relied implicitly upon his honesty, integrity, and impartiality. Lincoln soon moved to Springfield, Illinois, and began his law practice, a profession at which he admitted there was a popular belief that lawyers are necessarily dishonest. His advice to potential lawyers was, resolve to be honest at all events, and if in your judgment you cannot be an honest lawyer, choose some other occupation, rather than the one in the choosing of which you do in advance consent to be a knave. According to Judge David Davis, in whose court Lincoln practiced for many years, the framework for Lincoln's mental and moral being was honesty, and a wrong cause was poorly defended by him. Such was the transparent candor and integrity of his nature that he could not well or strongly argue a side or a cause that he thought to be wrong. So, this is virtue ethics. There are some people that don't appear to be swayed by certain things in life, okay? Now, certain vices we might be tempted by. Our integrity might be for sale at a certain price, like 95% of those students we looked at in the story. But there are some people that by the virtue of who they are. So the problem with this is there's not necessarily a great decision-making process here. It's just based on your personality. So because of my personality, I have a problem with a certain thing. Now, the problem with that is that most of life is not a moral dilemma, okay? There's a difference between a moral dilemma and a choice that you have to make. Most of life is knowing the right thing to do, but deciding whether you're going to do it or not. That's not a moral dilemma, okay? A moral dilemma is a case in which you truly do not know the right answer or the right thing to do, okay? But that is not most of life. Virtue ethics works well for most of life, okay? So you've got some decisions to make. You make them based on your internal compass, who you are. But when a moral dilemma comes along, how do you make that choice? So I'll give you an example of a moral dilemma, and this is one that is given in this book. He said that he was at a conference. He was talking ethics with a group of people, and one lady came up afterwards to talk to him. He said, this is a true story. I'm changing all of the details here. Came up to him, was very weepy, said, can we talk, and sat down. He said, let's talk. And she said, I have a question. I had a young boy who was very, very ill with a terminal disease. But he was so strong that his body fought very, very hard to stay alive, but it was painful at the end of his life to stay alive. And the doctors came to her and they said, he's in a lot of pain. Say the word and we can end this. So she said, we talked, we said, let's make sure that he's not in any pain anymore. And they overdosed the young man. She said, here's my question. Did I kill my child or did I set them free from pain? Do you have an answer for that one? That's a moral dilemma. And towards the end of a lot of people's life is when moral dilemmas come. Or maybe it's even someone in your family or an aging parent. You might have a moral dilemma like that one come up. How do you make that choice? Now, if you're going to wait and say, I think I'll know at the time, I think I'll have the right guide because of the virtue of who I am, is that a good time to be leaning on that as your moral compass? Or do you have something else to look at? That's virtue ethics. Can you think of other reasons that virtue ethics may not be the best ethic to lean upon for moral decision making? Can you think of other reasons why virtue ethics, which is there are certain things that I'm just based on who I am, I can handle those things.
Frankly, your example you just set up there, a lot of times we have dependency from input from other people.
Okay.
So the situational ethics are somewhat being biased by who
Okay.
you're talking to and the situation they're setting up for you. So
Okay.
that's one of the problems with it is you don't always know in the situation you're in that you really do know everything there is to know.
Okay. Okay. So you have doctors, you have other people that are giving you input, and they might have a bias that comes in with that. Yes.
So in some circumstances, you make these kind of hard decisions, and your mind, you think you make the right decision, and someone else who's also affected by it thinks you make the wrong decision. I'll give you an example of this. As some of you probably remember, my grandfather passed away back in November of last year, and I very much appreciate all the prayers and the thanksgivings that you all gave to me, but it came down to the decision of my father, who's a medical doctor, whether or not to continue treatment for him, have him on the ventilator or anything like that. My dad said no. He's been on the ventilator for too long. He's not going to come back from this. He's suffering right now. We just need to let him go. My dad called that a good moral decision, said that was a right choice. I have family members who strongly resent him for that, think that they should have given him more time to recover, to try to overcome this. It's hard to say which one was right. I agree with my dad, but I can see the points that other family members are making.
Yeah. So how do you make a moral choice when you have other people who the repercussions will come out for? What about if we just say we'll make decisions based on the virtue of who we are, but what if people have good virtues, but what if people have poor virtues? And what if people make bad choices and say, well, that's just the kind of person that I am? Because if virtue ethics works for making good choices and saying, I'm going to make good choices based on who I am, then it's got to work the other way too. If I make bad choices, I'm sorry. Joker, and Batman, that's just who I am. I'm just kind of this crazy person that makes these bad choices. So does virtue ethics work? And I would say that it's good for some things, yes. It might be good for when that college student, he would ask some other questions of his college students. What do you do when you're in the back seat of the car with that guy or girl that you love? In that situation, your virtue ethics may kick in. I know what the right thing to, okay, but that's different, again, from a moral dilemma. Again, most decisions in life are knowing the right thing to do. It's just deciding whether you're going to do it or not. So that's virtue ethics. Where do your ethics come from? They come from something inside of me, my personality or whatever. But there's also the argument that group ethics or family ethics, or some people could say you get your ethics from your tribe, okay? And I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm genuinely, I don't know what to think. I've done youth ministry a long, long time, and I could argue both sides. Because I can see, like some of you have said, that we give our young people a foundation, and there are a lot of great families out there, and the kids, they stay strong with the faith of their parents. But there's a lot of kids that aren't. How do you explain that? And so there's a part of me that says, we need to be aware of and really think about, where do our ethics, where do our morals come from? Because I don't know that necessarily having a family member, you even look at kids whose parents were ministers. And there's a joke about preachers' kids, right? There's a bunch of jokes about preachers' kids, right? Being the naughtiest kids in the church. Why is that? You've got a parent who's teaching you the right way. You hear them week after week. Why do they make the wrong choice? And so I think we have to help our young people learn how to decide what's right and what's wrong. So we've got to explain all the things we've been talking about in this class. Well, you could be a utilitarian and say, what works the best for the most people? That sounds like it's a good system. Or are you going to be a deontist? There are some things that are right and wrong, no matter what the consequences are. There's just certain things that are right and wrong. Or are you a moral relativist? Well, maybe each person can just decide for themselves. Is that the best way to do it? We have to start talking about these things to help ourselves and our young people and our world at large decide. How do you decide what's right and wrong? Now, starting next week, we're going to start 7 principles of what our author calls a minimally decent ethic, okay? We're going to look at 7 kind of backbone principles that we can use when we're making moral decisions. We're going to look at the first 4 next week. What are some things we can use as our backbone when looking at decisions and saying, what's the best, what's right and wrong, what should I choose here? Thank you so much for your discussion today. It's been really great. Thanks.